and just remote into my MacBook from here because I want to show you kind of both views as I'm going through and see if that works. So if it doesn't connect, that's going to suck. Demo app. I'm going to just see if I can connect to my Mac from here. So, at this point, I'd enter the MacBook name or the IP address. Now, wish I could, I don't even know if it's going to connect right now, so I'm just going to try and do a quick test of getting it to connect. Yes. Yes, please work. No, I wonder. I may have to try and tether to my device because I'm not thinking it's going to pick up the connection. So I'm going to try and, we're trying to, alright, so I'll get that connected, and see if maybe I can get this connected as well. Okay, so that's connected.
For me.
All right. Okay, let's give this another try. Oh, no. It's not your business. Okay. That was ridiculous, is it not? I don't have full screen mode. I don't know why it's like that. No, I can see my head there. There we go. Hello. Yeah, I think I need to buy a new projector for this. That was ridiculous. Well, I guess you can't say you can't see it. Okay. So, in order to ensure that you can connect from your Visual Studio, you need to go into System Preferences on your MacBook and click Sharing. So when you get to System Preferences, there we go, that's better.
So if you don't have MacBook installed,
yeah, if you don't have a MacBook, you can't compile your iOS applications. Okay, so.
It's only iOS though, right? If you just
Yeah, if you're just targeting Android, then you don't have to worry about it.
Android working no problem.
Okay, so on your MacBook, and before you attempt to connect with Visual Studio, you have to go into Sharing, and you have to enable remote login because it's not turned on by default. And then you can specify if it's all users or only specific users can access it. And then you have the IP address is available, as you can see, up at the top, more to the right. So that's how you know what to connect to from Visual Studio. If it doesn't find it on the network. So see here, like, let me just close this. So I'll pick this button again. It shows that my Mac agent's disconnected. I'll click it. It's not showing up here, so then I'm going to force it. Normally, if I'm on a normal network, especially at home, it picks up things like my whatever MacBook Pro's on the network, no problem. I think just because of the way that I'm connecting here, it's not picking it up, but that's okay. If you don't see it in the list, not all is lost. You just find out the IP address, and then that is it. Yeah, it just fixed the IP address. Sweet. Now just double click on that. Awesome. I'll have to corrected that for me. Okay, good. Now you can see I'm connected. And so I'll close that, and then you can see here it's showing, it's limited connection. Now it's officially connected. Now it's went from yellow to green. So whenever that's not green, that means you're not connected, and you'll have to reestablish a connection. If I click this button, show iOS simulator, all that does is it brings the iOS simulator to the front on the MacBook. So if on the MacBook I have multiple windows open and the simulator's behind them, I can just click that button and it'll bring it to the front, but on my MacBook, not on my machine. And again, you can't see it very well here because, whatever. Okay, so that's how to connect to a Mac agent. So now that I'm connected, I'm all good. I have multiple instances open. So, and I won't even bother with that. Okay. First thing I want to show you now that we've connected to the Mac agent is what it looks like if you want to include the new feature to have the precompiled sample in your solution. So you have this annotation here where you can specify your XAML compilation for the assembly, and then that means that any view in my Xamarin Forms, like my portable class library, that this specific assembly, any XAML views that I have, it will check against those and make sure that all the XAML is good, and kosher. So if there's a problem in my XAML file, it's going to tell me. So let's go here. I have entry text. That's great. That's a valid property. But then I'm just going to say like fake property equals blah. And normally when I compile without that precompilate, like that XAML compilation, it would just be fine until I ran, and then it would fail when it tried to load the view. But now, do you see at the bottom of the screen there? No property, bindable property, or event found for fake property. So now it's actually a compile time error. I can't run until I fix it. So that's that. If you don't want it there, you can take it off, or you could say skip. So I guess I should have left it in there and all. So now I've set it to skip. Say build. Oh, it's supposed to skip. It's not supposed to still do that. So whatever. Nice. Let's see if that lets me run. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Okay, let's take that off. Let's see what happens. There we go. Yeah, I'm still getting that error, right? Interesting. Let me see. That's awesome. Oh, because I left the property in there. That's why. Yeah, of course I can't run. Let's get rid of that. Yeah. Oh. I'll have to play around with that a bit more and see why they skipped it. Skip it, let me try them. There we go. Okay. So there's this weather app. Awesome, right? I'm going to say get weather in Florida. It's already pre-entered in there. So it's going to go through that. And it's going to take forever. So while that's loading, what's going to happen is it's going to show me the main weather, and then on the forecast page, it's going to have this list view, which shows, the weather every 3 hours. And if I want to update, to say, oh, maybe there's been an update, and it's not showing in the list since I loaded the app, I want to check, I can do a pull to refresh. That's driven by this property called is pull to refresh enabled. That's really pretty simple. You set it to true or false, and then you give it a refresh command. So the command that will execute, so whatever command is actually going to execute the API call in this case. And then you have to set the status of a property called is refreshing. So pull to refresh, true, what command it's going to call, and make sure that that call is asynchronous, and you use the async and await operators. And then you can bind to like a flag to have it show that it's refreshing, and once it's done, it comes back from the web call, we can set it to false to say it's no longer refreshing. And then everything else is taken care for you in the UI. Did it come back? No? Unable to get weather. Awesome. Let me connect my device, because that will work. There's always a backup.
So, really stupid question for people who have already got into Xamarin. I'm assuming you can connect your apps to a Microsoft SQL server through the Xamarin app.
An SQL server?
Yeah, like you've got a Microsoft SQL database server somewhere over here. Can you have your Xamarin app connect to that and retrieve data from it?
I recommend that you have a web API layer, which you use to marshal calls through, and for authorization and security purposes simply, right?
Right.
So if you do have a backend SQL server,
you'll have to go through a web API to be able to
definitely develop a web API app. I believe I have seen on the forums people have done it where they've done a direct connection, but I highly advise against it unless it's your own personal app and it's just you affecting change in a database for some reason.
Right.
But definitely develop a web API layer. Okay, so let's use my trusty device and hope that nobody messages me while I'm running this, because that would be embarrassing. So this thing is clearly not going to work, so get rid of that. There we go. All right. Now this is an app developed by James Montemagno. He's a Xamarin evangelist. He has tons of great examples online, all in his GitHub repo. Everything that you can think of that, things that you want to include in your app that don't already exist, he's developed a component or a plugin for it or a sample app that does it. He's really, really great. And he's also very good at answering questions. So if there's an issue with with any of the projects, just send him a message, and he usually is pretty good about getting back to you, even though he's super busy. This guy's always traveling, he's always on the road, but he's a really great guy, and he really enjoys helping people. So let's do this on a real device. This should be a lot faster. Should be. Get the weather. All right. Yes. Man, the rest of my demos rely on the web, so that would be unfortunate if it didn't work. Okay, so you can see, there we go. We have, a history of what the weather was. But if I want to see, okay, maybe there's been an update. I pull to refresh, and did you see I see that indicator, I let go, it's making that call, and then coming back, there's nothing. But then it hides that indicator that it's doing anything. So that's all with 3 properties on a list view. That's available to you in Xamarin Forms now, and it wasn't before.
Can I ask a question? On your XAML view,
Yes.
you have a property on the separator color. Inside that iOS transparent. Is this an iOS specific view, or is it just if it's on iOS it understands it if it's not iOS?
No, the on platform is XAML element, or not just XAML element, because you can use it in code as well. So on platform allows you to tweak the way a view will render for a specific device, or for a specific platform, not device. So in this case, in the list view, I can say on platform for iOS transparent, but for Android I can make it blue, for Windows I can make it a different color. No. Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, what's happening is the list view is going to render exactly as it would on Android and Windows Phone without it being affected. iOS automatically includes these separator lines in between the cells, or the rows. So at this point, it's just hiding it, just for visual feel. And I find that's a good way to do it because sometimes the cell doesn't render properly in iOS, and so then some of the font will get cut off, or because of that separator line, or overlap that line. I forget which one it was, but it was really ugly. So this is a good way to handle it, just hide that line. And so yeah, so if there's any tweaks with Xamarin Forms, if you find that you're running it, and it looks great on these, these platforms, but this one platform, if something isn't lining up right, then you have to provide certain tweaks for it. So you can affect, padding, margins, color, you name it. Yeah. So another thing that I want you to notice is on the list view, there's an element, there's a property called caching strategy. So this is what's also been added. And that's what I was talking about before when I mentioned that it allows you to recycle the cell views. So in this case, if you set your caching strategy to recycle element, it offers faster, improved performance, because instead of creating a cell for every single element in your list, it's only going to create the cells for the view that's in view, and then maybe a little bit before and a little bit after. And as you're cycling through them, then it will just recycle that cell that's already rendered with new data. As long as your cells in your list are all render the same data and the bindings are not too complex, this will work really well for you. Okay? If you don't want it, you can set caching strategy to retain element, or just remove it, because by default retain element is the default property. And it is recommended that if you are using this, definitely take time to do your proper testing and profiling, and that's where profiling application will come in handy to make sure that there's no memory leaks and that performance is optimal and things are being released when you expect them. Because sometimes maybe recycle element may not be the optimum choice in the scenario that you're using it in. Like I said, if you have like a cell that's crazy with like 20 bindings, and maybe then recycle element's not the right way to go for you. So
this app uses Xamarin Forms?
This is Xamarin Forms.
So there's no difference for code. No application, render specific code.
Platform specific?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, this is just specifically Xamarin Forms, so it's not platform specific.
So everything is cheap.
If you're developing like an app, you kind of have to make a decision of Xamarin Forms or all the others. You can't kind of do both at the same time. Am I correct?
You can.
You can?
You can. You can have an app that has native views and Xamarin Forms views mixed in, right?
Yeah.
So say I have an application where I have a login page. Well, the login page is pretty straightforward. It's just a couple of text elements, a button, some labels. That's a Xamarin Form. Then I log in and I'm at a different page, and then that has some platform-specific functionality. And it's a little bit more complex to render, and there's controls in there that I'm using that aren't available in Xamarin Forms, but I need to have a custom look and feel. Well, then that's a native view that I can develop. But then they go to a settings page, and then that's just text, so just a list of things. Okay, then that can be a Xamarin Form. So as you're designing your views, it's not one or the other. You can start off with your application template as a native or a Xamarin Forms template, and it creates your first view in that way. But as you're adding other views in, don't box yourself in to say, well, this is Xamarin Forms app, I can only do Xamarin Forms. No, you can include native views in there and navigate between the two.
I guess you couldn't, like storyboards are an iOS only thing.
Yes.
Then you can't really do that, obviously. You
Um,
can't do both.
In Xamarin, you can have a view that's an iOS storyboard. You can navigate to a Xamarin Forms page. Yeah, because the navigation is handled in code, right? It's not part of the storyboard itself. It's in the code. It's in the view controller. You control navigation that way, so you can navigate to a Xamarin Forms page, and vice versa. And there's examples online, and there's people that have talked about it online, including both. And so you're able to find direction online for how to do it. But yeah, you can definitely mix and match. And you're not tied into one or the other. Yeah.
How's the performance compared to the native language? Like,
For Xamarin Forms?
Yeah.
The initial releases, the performance, especially for list views and things like that, were a little slower. I mean, it's not something that's so noticeable that it's unusable because it was really good. And this release of Xamarin Forms, they've improved the performance by providing this caching strategy, by providing a compiled XAML. So with a compiled XAML, other benefits that you get besides the compile time errors, it's a smaller assembly size because it strips out all the XAML before it compiles the assembly, so it's not included in there. And as well, and it reduces the load and instantiation time of the XAML views if you use compiled XAML. So there are some performance improvements. Native is still going to be faster, but it's not such a difference that would be extremely noticeable. Especially with Xamarin Forms, you want to make sure that your views are not overly complex. You want to make sure they're simple views because then that also affects performance. So if you try to create like something that's super complex and integrated in Xamarin Forms, you probably will experience some issues. Okay. So,
Is there a GUI for this? Can you do this on the GUI? Like this is like
there's no designer for Xamarin Forms right now. No, this is purely XAML syntax, but you do have IntelliSense in there, so you do have that.
So typically the developers then code this and then look at it through an emulator or something like that, so how they will see.
Yeah, and that's the thing is because it will look differently on each platform.
Yeah.
You have to run it on each platform you're going to support to see how it would look. Because I'll run it on Android and it's going to look the way you saw it. But if I run it on iOS, it's not going to look exactly the same way because the controls on iOS are different. And same with Windows. So you have to run it against the platforms that you expect to support in order to see how it will render in each view, like in each platform. So there's that extra work there to understand how it's going to render.
Xamarin will do only phone applications.
Pardon?
Only phone. It's application only for the phone, and it's can do on the MacBook as well.
That's a good question. I'll have to look into that to see if you can design a Mac app using Xamarin Forms. I don't think you can, but I'll double check. I have to say never. You never know.
You can do a Qt, like a Linux-based app. I did try that. Do you want to try that?
Someone mentioned that before. And no, you can't use Xamarin for that. So very interesting though.
Steve, you're out.
Okay. So just stop that, and we can go back to the presentation. Just to show you a pinch to zoom. And again, this is a project that that is available on GitHub by a Xamarin developer put up there. So just a simple, is that me? Okay.
You talked about the difference in rendering between the three platforms, so like you're gonna have basic code in Visual Studio, are you gonna just do bit mapping or something going on to move the objects around so that they have the same look to them in the three different renderings?
They have custom renderers in the platform that do all that work to render it using the native controls for each platform. So there's built-in renderers that Xamarin provides, but so that when it is compiled, it's rendered.
So you can get a
native.
quick snapshot of the look of it by running it and
You have to run it to see what it's going to look like, yes.
Evangelist guy that we're talking about.
James Montemagno. So, this is, there we go. Come on, there we go. Okay. So again, this is another demo project that was, that's available online on GitHub. I'll post all these links after. So now I'm just going to, like zoom into a picture, zoom out, and that's all through a gesture recognizer that's now available in Xamarin Forms. So let's take a look at essentially what he had to do. Okay, so he created a pinch to zoom container and he wired up a pinch gesture recognizer. So that's part of the platform, that's available. And then he does some all the crazy calculations that you need to do to scale that photo to actually do something on that command, right? So you can decide whatever action you want to take when someone pinches or zooms out. But in this case, he's scaling the photo and like zooming in and zooming out and like scaling it properly, depending on what the gesture is, right? So it really is as simple as wiring up that recognizer. The hard part is deciding and designing your own action, I guess coding your own action to take. So if it is something like this, where you want to zoom in and out of a picture, you can probably just reuse this code. It's available on GitHub. I'm sure it's available under the MIT license. And then adapt it to your project as you need it, or just create a custom action to do whatever it is that you want to do on that action. Okay? And there are other gestures that are coming down the road that Xamarin does plan on continuing the growth of Xamarin Forms to provide more rich functionality. But the pull to refresh, the pinch gesture, they're just the starting examples of what's to come, and so it's pretty powerful.